at the top. I'm the principal of Wakefield Forest, and I'm here tonight with Mr. Gray, our advanced academics resource teacher, and we're here tonight to focus a little bit more on the screening and identification process. So it will be a little bit different than the previous session that we held, and we'll have a chance to answer your questions. And throughout the meeting, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if there are questions that you either want to directly message to me, the chat is at the bottom. It looks like a little talk bubble, and you can send me either a direct private message or you can put something in the chat for the group, and I'll work on answering that while Mr. Gray goes through the presentation, and then questions that we feel are kind of for the good of the whole, we'll try to answer at the end. So thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Like Ms. Brindle said, I'm Mr. Gray. I'm going to kind of walk you through this presentation today. I was thinking about this is my 23rd year of teaching, and I just thought about it. I've been over half of my teaching career has been focused on the AAP identification. So I feel very comfortable with this presentation more so than any other one. So any questions that you may have, like Ms. Brindle said, feel free to put them in the chat. Raise your hand. While I've done this hundreds of times, this may be your first time going through with your child or children. So we want to make sure that we answer all your questions and make sure you have a plan of action as you move forward. I will say the presentation is pretty comprehensive. So if you have a question, I would write it down and just kind of see if the presentation will naturally answer the questions. And if it feels like it hasn't, then that would probably be a good time to kind of jump in and ask like follow-up questions. So let's go ahead and start with this. So pretty much every presentation with FCPS with the AAP talks about like the beliefs, right? And fortunate to be a part of the FCPS and the excellent education that all students are being provided, right? Because of they're getting individual needs. There's a relationship between all factions involved, including teachers, families, and the students. There is a high expectation in Fairfax County. You could just, if you kind of ask around the country, you'll find that Fairfax County is generally a leader in a lot of different things, especially with the AAP environment. And one of the reasons why we're one of the leaders is like we understand that there needs to be multiple opportunities for students to kind of pursue their strengths and interests. So the two big goals of the advanced academics program is really talent development and differentiation. And so in this presentation, you'll get some examples of each of those and how FCPS is putting together a process to be able to kind of tackle both of those goals. So the first one, talent development, right? What does that look like in Fairfax County? It really has a couple of different prongs. The first one is the AAP curriculum, the strategies that are used in it regardless of whatever the identification, that AAP curriculum is kind of infused through all of the curriculum, whether it's a kindergarten or a fifth grade. There's AAP curriculum embedded in all of the curriculum, which is kind of exciting. There is opportunities for students to kind of explore their area of interest, and there's a lot of opportunities for us to identify those interests with students. And there's always been well, I would say I shouldn't say always. There's been a recent attention to historically underrepresented groups. Most notably is the Young Scholars Model, and so we talked about that in the last session. So if you're really interested in diving deep into the Young Scholars Model, you can go on our school website, or you can go on the AAP website, and they have extensive information on the Young Scholars Model. The other prong of the two goals is differentiation, right? And so what does it mean to differentiate for advanced learners, or for realistically for any learners, right? So we're trying to meet those students by their name and their individual needs, right? We're trying to create multiple opportunities like I said in the earlier presentations, to earlier slides, to focus on their strengths, right, and develop those strengths. There is different ways to access curriculum that's differentiated, whether it's through the increased depth on a topic and complexity, looking at it conceptually, whether it's taking away some scaffolds so that they can really jump into the information, whether it's the pacing, right? Well, a quicker pace, math, you see that most notably. That's usually one of the questions that we get is the math curriculum, right? It's the math. They've slowed it down a little bit from recent years, but it's probably one of the parts of the AAP curriculum that your students and parents notice uh, the most, is how that math kind of really gets ratcheted up pretty quickly. But they the county has been working on kind of changing that a little bit, so the students can be successful as they move up the chain towards the middle school and high school, and then eventually into college. All right, another way to differentiate is putting peers together with the same academic interests, so that they can promote growth. One of the things I always loved as an AAP teacher is hearing all the different ways students would tackle a problem, and I always kind of told my students to really not just focus on the way, like a process or a strategy that Mr. Gray would only give you, but also look at how each of your peers may tackle the same problem and come up with a different solution. And but sometimes potentially you can get 6 or 7 different ways to tackle a problem. And I thought that was a pretty powerful way to kind of learn to hear all the different approaches. And then again, going back to the young scholars model, there's some pretty much scaffolding and supports to kind of help students with talent development in different settings. So one of the things that kind of started right coming out of COVID is what's called local built-in norms. And what it really was looking at was looking at our students in Wakefield Forest, and looking at them against each other, and looking for the students that may be what they consider the outliers, right? And being able to see how we can help those students grow, right? So there's like a big shift, which is saying on the first part, the research based. But the belief is that we want to provide rigorous instruction, and we want to make sure we have access to peers being able to kind of learn from each other as well as from the teacher. And then one of the ways we kind of look at these built-in norms is we look at like the local setting, in our case, Wakefield Forest, and we look at that data, like I said, kind of intro into this slide, the outliers, and what setting would be the best for each student. Because remember, we're going by name and need. So this slide right here is really what last month's presentation was on, just showing the global AAP overview, pretty much from kindergarten all the way till they graduate high school. So again, I would reference going back to the Wakefield Forest website to get information, in-depth information on here. We'll kind of touch on a little bit in this, but for the most part, we're really focusing on that full-time AAP on the bottom left, the grades 3 through 8. So like I said, the full-time, that's what we're focusing on. And what does the full-time AAP service really look like? It's a program that's really focused on differentiating instruction on all 4 of the content areas, and with a peer group that have similar academic needs. All right. And so we're kind of go over like the whole process of preparing a packet for you to be able to potentially have to I shouldn't say potentially, to have your child screened to see if this is a right fit for them, right? But if they're eligible for full-time AAP services, what they will get is advanced language arts curriculum, math, science, and social studies, so the 4 content areas. What it really does is it's a high degree of frequency and intensity with differentiation, and it's really focused on, again, going a little quicker, going more in depth, or you can look at things more conceptually. You can look at it from different angles, different perspectives, and really looking at different complexities of the content and the skills. So um, that's what your child is potentially in for. So the way you get access or go through the screening process is there's three different ways we can start this process. One is a family referral where you as the mom or dad can fill out a referral form to kind of kickstart the referral process. Another one may be a Fairfax County employee will recommend that your child be screened. And a third one, which is called a universal screener referral, where it looks at some of the data, and it the data would represent that we need to take a closer look at that child. But in all three of these, there's no advantage one over the other. Like in most cases, in 2 and 3, staff referral and a universal screener referral, we would still request that the family still submit a referral form, that they still submit a parent questionnaire, and they still submit some work samples on behalf of their child or children, just because we want to look at the child in the home setting as well as in the school setting. And if you remember the earlier slide, we talked about having a relationship between, the student, the teachers, and the family, right? So we want to get as much comprehensive information going into this screening process as possible. So the process is there's a full-time AAP referral form you can go on. We will make this presentation accessible to you after this presentation. We'll put it on our website. You can contact me if you have any follow-up questions. I'm sure Ms. Prendo might be answering some questions in the chat as well. But it all starts with a referral form. Which is due on December 15th. And this is a pretty strict deadline because they're average between 7 to 8,000 packets a year. So it's very important that you get it in on or before December 15th. And I think we have 4 o'clock is what we've been saying on December 15th. I would highly recommend, if you're probably on this presentation because you think there is a possibility that your child or children need this access to this curriculum, that you start by getting a referral form in now and getting the rest of the information by December 15th. Unfortunately, I've had a couple instances over last 12 or 13 years where parents submitted something on December 16th and said something came up, and that's a decision like we don't make, the county makes. And then every instance that happened, the family had to wait another year for it. This is one thing that the county is really strict on. Now there is, if you happen to miss this, there is some other opportunities because we have a multitude of ways of differentiating within Fairfax County. Most notably the part-time AAP, which is a kind of a pull-out program once a week from grades 3 to 8. And there's also a subject-specific AAP, which is generally done in the classroom, and it's focused usually on just one subject like language arts or math. So I mentioned that some of the referral processes will automatically come from a universal screener referral. Again, this is just looking at some data, and it doesn't mean that if your child is one of the students that's been selected to go through the referral process because of this path, that there's any advantage over it. I've seen many times students not get admitted from this process. And so this is one thing, no matter what path, every time you send a referral form, you will hear the same thing from me. I'm going to request parent questionnaire. I'm going to request work up to 2 pages of work samples, and that'll come up just so that we have the most information going into the screening process. So the way the process goes is the referral comes in, parents submit the information that I just told you that I would request by December 15th. That process starts. All the teachers are notified that total list on or before December 15th. As they come on, I usually CC the teacher so they're aware. And then there's a process where the teachers go through they gather their own work samples, they do a hope scale, they look at some data, and then all this is put together in a portfolio, and we have a local school committee that usually meets. It's usually Miss Prindo, Miss Williams, and maybe Esau teacher, might be guidance counselor, myself, usually the classroom, well, usually always the classroom teachers involved in it unless there's some uh, special circumstance, but all those people are in the room, and our job is just to make sure that we are submitting a portfolio that shows your child's strengths to the best of his or her abilities. That's our main responsibility, because you'll see that central office will actually make the decisions on acceptance. And so what's in this, like I said, we're gathering all this information more specifically. There's a screen and summary sheet, which has some data on it and has some biographical information. It tells the grade, the teacher, and all that stuff. The hope scale, which I mentioned earlier, it's only the teachers have to do this. You have a parent questionnaire, which is kind of loosely tied. If you want to if you're doing the parent questionnaire, you're like, I'm not sure how to answer this, I would recommend just kind of going on the AP website and look at the hope scale that the teachers have to fill out. And that will give you a sense of really what the committee is kind of looking at in regard to how to answer the questions on the parent questionnaire. Um, Obviously, we look at report cards, we look at the data sheet, the test data sheet. All right, we're looking at a multitude of testing information, and then we're looking at work samples. So the total packet can have up to 6 single-sided pages of work samples. Parents have the opportunity to submit up to 2 pages of those work samples, and then we'll talk about that a little bit later. But that kind of gives you a little overview of like what that portfolio or packet looks like moving forward. So really we're looking at the best practices, right, for identification. And we're really focused on looking at a holistic review. And the point of this whole slide is that all that information that was on the screen, there's no one piece of information that's weighted more heavily than the other, right? And that was something that couldn't be said in the past, right? And so they've really gone through a process, and the best way I usually say this every presentation, it's almost like a college admissions process where you're looking at the whole child and the global approach at it. We're looking for the well-rounded student. So this is something you really have to keep in mind when you look at the portfolio, especially after you have access to it. And we'll explain how you can get access to it. So like I said, the Hope Gifted Rating Scale will be generally done by the teacher. Sometimes we will make sure that the teacher, the grade level before, has an opportunity to kind of look at it and give any feedback in regards to how to fill out the Gifted Rating Scale. But it has 11 different indicators on it that are focused on academic and social skills. So if you're really interested in looking at that, again, I would ask you to go back to the AP website. There's a link at the end of the last slide that you can kind of get you started to go over there. And it can show you more of the information on what's being filled out. This Hope Scale is really, when teachers are asked to fill this out, they're really looking at it and they're comparing it to each student of similar age. So they would never compare a Hope Scale of a 2nd grader to a Hope Scale of a 6th grader, right? They're trying to look at similar backgrounds and experience at the current school, which in this case is Wakefield Forest. this helps give a good overview of how that student fits in the scheme of their current environment, which is Wakefield Forest. So like I said, one of the indicators is the ability test, right? So Fairfax County makes sure that all students have at least one nationally normed ability test. So second grade does the COGAT, first grade does the Naglieri. The COGAT was already administered, and one of the misconceptions is a lot of parents wait until they see the results of the COGAT to decide whether they are going to put in a referral on behalf of their child or children. We would advise against this because the COGAT information hasn't been coming in before the deadline, and I know someone might say, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would that not results not come in before the deadline? We have to think about it. It's a nationally normed test, and so this testing is being done all across the US. So it's the testing before they can get all the tests across the whole US, and then they have to kind of analyze the data to make sure there's no outliers and stuff like that, and then they eventually give their results for it. And Ms. Prindo is usually the expert when it comes to data stuff, and so I'm not putting her on the spot, but I'm just saying if you have any questions with that, I'm sure Ms. Prindo loves to kind of dive into data. That's one thing I found out about her. One of many things, but pretty cool thing. So this data is, like I said, one multiple point. Again, hopefully I've stressed in the earlier slides, really the family input, how important this is, right? I I personally just can't understand how you would just send in a referral form and not any other information. As a parent, I feel it's really important. Like if I'm going to give out anything about my child, I want to give them as much as I can, right? And in most cases, most families do that, and they do. And there is a limit to how much you can give. Probably one of the ones where parents really want to give a lot of contributions is on the work samples and in the parent questionnaire, right? So when you look at the parent questionnaire, there's some demographic information you fill out, and then there's a couple questions. I believe there's 4 questions. You rate the frequency, and then you're asked to give some information below it to support your rating. This is the spot where they don't give you a big box. They're just looking for you to have to give an example or a couple quick examples that are very concise for the committee to kind of look at to support your frequency of how you answered that question. And I can't stress enough, even though you're given more information, that this piece needs to be really concise. Because if you remember what I said earlier, 7 to 8,000 packets are being screened, or probably will be screened this year. It's pretty safe to say that. And so you can imagine people looking at these packets. So you want to have the information that's going to catch their eye quickly. So if it's a really long, verbose answer to something, you know they should read everything, but just to be safe, yeah, it's better to just get to have a concise point in what you're trying to explain in regards to that rating. So usually what I tell when you fill out the referral form or the questionnaire, just try to have quick bullet points that that the committee can just kind of look at and get a glean of the information really quickly. So again, so the referral form by December 15th, all right. Technically, if your child is screened for the universal screener referral, that's the one where you do not, well, that one and the teacher one, you do not technically need a parent filling out a referral form. But again, I always say it's safe to submit that just so that we have more information, right? And then, like I said, the school, we will put together a screening portfolio and all the information that goes into it. So we've talked about the questionnaire and we've talked about the referral form. Let's talk about the pages of student work samples, right? So you really only get 2 pages to 8.5 by 11. There's no audio or video stuff that can be done. So it's really important that you pick samples that are going to showcase your child's strengths. So the example that the county has put on here is a vehicle of the future. And so this sample you're probably looking at, it's like, all right, so it's just a truck and a fire response unit. What's so great about this sample? One of the things that the committee might be looking at is they're looking at, like, there's a lot of detail in this drawing. There's attention to the coloring is really, they made sure to make it look very authentic and realistic. There's some creativity involved in these two pictures, right? Um it's got a bunch of components in there. It's labeled well, and you would think this is something as adults, this is pretty easy, but working with children, like, labeling is not the easiest task with them. Adding this uh much information is not always seen in every work sample, right? So this is an example of work sample that would show, so there was a lot of thought process going into this tree recovery truck and the urgent fire response unit. So looking at the guidelines, 2 pages maximum. The other thing, one of the things parents like to submit is like a story, and maybe a story is 6 pages long. That's not considered one work sample. That would be considered 6 pages. So usually what we would suggest is pick a piece from the story that you want to showcase some important feature of it, whether it's advanced vocabulary, whether it's a great beginning, or whether there's a moral to the story, and just write on the side there, like, what the focus is, again, making it easy for the committee to see. I will help you along the way with this. If you have something you're like, Mr. Gray, I'm not sure whether I should submit this, I would just generally tell you, send it to me, I'll take a look at it, and I'll let you know whether it's something that we probably could potentially use, or whether it's not. The other thing I'll ask you is, when the teachers submit some information, like, if you heard earlier, there's 6 total pages in this packet. They submit up to 4. If they have 6 good work samples, I may be reaching back out to you saying, oh, I noticed that the teacher has sample 5 and 6, which seems much stronger than the 2 samples that you submitted. Are you okay with that? And that is something you as a parent have the right to say, no, I think these 2 pages really showcase my child, so I want them left in. Or you could say, oh, we trust in what you guys are doing. If you think this is a better sample, go ahead and put it in there. But I will make sure to always communicate that if we are going to switch it out, so that you are aware of that. If you are going to submit something electronically, I will tell you it's very helpful, because anything, well, the majority of that's been coming in since COVID has been electronic, but if you can, I would advise you to send in PDFs and JPEGs when you send it in via email, and I will always give you a receipt letting you know that I received it, just because any papers that come in, I will have to digitize them afterwards. And so it would save me a little time. It's not a game breaker. If you have a paper thing, it's not accessible, don't say, all right, Mr. Gray said I need it digital. I'll make it work, but it would be one little less step I would have to do in a situation. So just keep that in mind. And another thing you have to make sure that's being able to be read by the committee. One other problem is sometimes people will say, well, I got 4 good work samples, I'm gonna just smush them on 2 pages, right? They really want to make sure that you have only 1 page of work, or that you're not putting multiple samples and just splitting them in half and reducing the size by like 50%. Even though we know that's a technique that's been used in the past, we're really trying to focus on making sure it's being able to be read by the committee, because all of this packet is being looked at digitally. And so sometimes you guys know, being on a computer all day, how challenging it can be, especially if it's a really small font. One of the other things that we've had in the past is a lot of art samples, right? While art samples generally look good, we're really focused on like the academic program. We really try to make sure we have a math sample in there. We have a language art sample in there. If we can get some samples that show concepts and advanced thinking, or putting together a multitude of skills together, and showing application information, those are the most powerful ones, right? Now, if you happen to have an art sample that's like an art teacher would say, oh man, that art concept is like 3 grade levels above, you're showing foreshadowing and shading and all the different things, and that's a different story. But if it's just a picture or somebody drew it and it kind of looks nice, to use a good color scheme or something, that's probably not going to be the best sample. The other sample that comes across a lot that we see is Lego sets, right? And well, it's common to hear, oh, there was a 120-piece Lego set uh, kit that my son or daughter was able to put together this week, just following the directions. Again, that's kind of a following directions thing. While that's a great skill to have, in this case, we're looking at application of information. Now, if you took that same kit that they built it, and then all of a sudden they pulled it apart and they made something amazing out of it that showcased some application of information, like maybe they were studying renewable and non-renewable energy, and they created some kind of display showing the solar panels and stuff like that that would tie into their academic program. That would be a powerful Lego piece. So we're just trying to kind of help you think about what the committee's really looking for. And what they're looking for, if you see in the blue there, is exceptional critical and creative thinking, reasoning, and problem solving, right, in the work. That's the ultimate goal in the packets. Here's the parent questionnaire, which I was referred to earlier. There's 5 questions. I apologize, I said 4 earlier. And then you can see there's a frequency that you see it occasionally, frequently, and consistently. And then there's an opportunity to fill the information in those gray boxes. I would caution you, if you get it online versus print it out, the online version shows the gray box keeping going below, like it starts to hide the second part of information. Like you could technically go on and on and on, but I've found over the years that sometimes you can't always access that information that's below that gray area. So this is earlier when I was saying, really looking for concise information that would fit in that gray box, right? And so there is quite a bit of space there for you to kind of get in an example or two to support the 5 different questions. There is one opportunity on this. If your child has a special learning need, there is an opportunity for you to fill out yes there, and then you could submit an additional page, because there probably will be need for a lot more information to kind of showcase, or not showcase, but explain what the additional information or the needs that the child's having, whether it's IEP, 504, accommodation, stuff like that. That the committee will gladly take on an extra page. But if it's just doing an extra page for the top 5 questions, the committee usually tells us that unfortunately they can't accept that extra page of information. Even right below the yellow box, there's a signature. There's a signature on the referral form and a signature on the questionnaire. There's only 2 spots where you need to have a signature on it, and we need to make sure that you have the signature on it. I usually double check, but just to make sure, if you can make sure it's signed, even if it's signed in a text text feature, that's completely fine in the digital world and dated, obviously. Um, so there is, like we said earlier, there is some testing that they go through, COGAT second grade, NAGLAR in first grade. There's an opportunity if you wanted to pursue some additional testing. George Mason is kind of our partner with state testing, and you don't need to get the psychologist license number if you are if you're interested in getting some more information. We generally advise you, in most instances, a first grader gets a NAGLA area, a second grader gets a COGAT. So if you were interested in doing additional testing, we would advise you to probably do the WIS 5 or WIS 4 or WIS 5 that George Mason will advise you on which one to do. It's a test that's very similar to the COGAT, but it's a little different, and it would be that test and information will give a little variance than the other two, and so it just helps the committee get a general a broader picture. It's not needed. This is an additional thing, and this is something, if you're interested in doing this is something that you would have to purchase and deal with George Mason University on the fees with that and get the information. If you were going to pursue this, this is something you would want to do fairly quickly, depending on their, I don't know what their timelines turnaround of test results, but we will, if you do get the testing and you don't get the results in by 12:15, as long as you let us know you've done the testing, we can put that in the packet that testing's forthcoming, the results, and then as soon as you get it, we put it in. But obviously this is something would be easier if we could get it in before December 15th. So all this information is done. You've done your part. By 12:15, the teachers work on their part, which they pretty much get about another month and a half to kind of really nail down their side. We have our screening committee. We look at it. We say, this thing looks good to go. The central office says, here's when you need to turn your packets in. Once that is turned into central office, you are more than welcome to send me an email and ask for a copy of that packet. That is your right as a parent. We do this after it's gone. That way, the teachers can make sure that their information that's submitted was, there was no undue pressure on them on how to fill out information, and that that information goes forthcoming. And so that's the process with that. And that's usually, I would say, mid-January, mid to late January is when we get all of our information, maybe early February. Uh, I'll, when you send in your referral form, I'll kind of give you a timeline of when everything's going to be done and when you can expect a decision, which is generally in April. Now, the packet has gone off the central screening process. Like I said, there's 7,000 to 8,000 packets. There's a lot of eyes that look at every portfolio that goes through that process. So it's not one person is making a decision on whether your child or children should be admitted into the program. As many as, I think, 11 particular people could look at a packet, and then in most instances it takes at least four eyes to have a common response to whether accepted or not accepted, before that packet may be done. And then the central committee will then email out all of the responses, whether your child was eligible. If your child was not eligible, there's an opportunity to appeal the process. Again, we'll give you the deadlines for that as they're coming, but just be assured it's a very tedious process. That's a process that I'm involved with. All AARTs across the county are responsible for attending three of those sessions. They're generally They go from 5 to 7 days looking at all those packets, and there's generally about 100 plus ARTs, principals, anybody that's in Fairfax County that's a teacher or specialist can sign up and get trained to look at these portfolios. So there's a lot of different types of eyes looking at them as well. Again, like I said, the email eligibility will be sent. It's usually sent to the person that filled out the referral form, the email address. Oh, I take that back. The email address of the enrolling parent or guardian, right? And then they will give you, like I said, directions on how to accept the placement or defer services. So getting a little ahead of myself, but if you get accepted, we will have one more meeting in the spring, which we'll talk about what it looks like now that your child's been accepted and what the program looks like for your child specifically. Um, and then that's what I'm referring to in the last paragraph, the orientation dates. So, and then you can make your decisions. And there's a whole, we can also go over like the options to whether you stay local or go into a um I'm drawing a blank on it. I've been going really well. Um, what am I missing? Miss Brendo. It's not, it's local and oh, I can't
Local
remember.
in the center base, is
Oh,
that
center base. Yeah, sorry. I was doing so well. Um, so dates again, December 15th. Keep hammering on that over and over if you want to start this process. And then if accepted, the services will begin in the fall of of this of next year. And then we've already passed the fall screening, so that doesn't that's not pertinent to us right now. Ineligibilities, just like eligibilities, you'll be notified and it'll give the process on how to appeal. The one thing they will just tell you that your child is ineligible. They will not give you like a report on why your child or children were considered ineligible. But you can go through the appeal process, and the appeal process usually means you have to submit something new to the committee, new testing information, new work samples. They won't just look at the same packet and say, all right, I just want you to look at it again a second. They won't do that. You have to present something new to it. And I can help you with that if your child is considered ineligible. I'll be happy to look at the packet and give you some advice on why we think your child may have been considered ineligible. Again, appeal the process, that there's a whole deadline. The one thing is the whole process will be done by the end of the school year, this school year cycle. And then in the spring, while this is all going on, we will also be screening. This is something that is done at Wakefield Forest, and we make the decision on this. We usually screen every student for subject specific or part-time AAP services as well. And so every year we look at the students and we meet with the teachers and make sure that your child is placed in the appropriate challenging environment. Um, so again, why a student might be ineligible, the committee may just feel that the peer group that they are fine in the peer group that of their current setting, or that a better match to the AP curriculum um, may be a way to meet their differentiations. That second one's really referring to like maybe they're strong in only math, and maybe the sample showed they're strong in math, but some of the maybe language arts samples weren't strong, or other information didn't seem strong. So there would be an opportunity for them to look at advanced math in the following grade, or to look at subject specific services, or to meet with Mr. Gray for part-time services once a week, right? So, and that's what we look at that at the end of the full-time services, which I just mentioned in the slide prior. And again, this is not an indication that they're not capable of advanced coursework. It's just basically advanced academic materials are used in all classes, right? This was something I was saying, it's in all the curriculum. Maybe the frequency won't be as much as it would be in a full-time AAP classroom. But so the one thing Fairfax County wants to make sure that everybody's aware of, that there's a variety of pathways to meet the needs of advanced learners, again, based off of their strengths and interests. And so I've kind of gone through a lot of information. If you wasn't able to get all this information, and or you'd like a question answered after, maybe just with me, there's our school phone number, my email. Please make me the first point of contact. They always put the AP office on there, but you can imagine the number of requests they may get for our number of questions. So make me your first point of contact. I'll be more than happy to help you with this. Besides doing STEAM, this is the other part of my job, and I feel really comfortable with answering most questions regarding this. And if I don't know the answers, I know the people that have the answers, and I can get you an answer. But in the meantime, I'll probably turn it over to Miss Prendo, who was probably monitoring their chats, and see if there's anything that needs to be addressed as a group. And if anybody has questions, they can probably put it in the chat and we can address it, or just raise their hand.
I don't know if you wanted, the presentation part down.
Okay.
Mr. Grayson, you're good. There have been a lot of questions in the chat that I've been answering, and I've had a lot of direct messages. And I would just add a couple of points. And one, there were a lot of, and every year there's always a lot of questions about, should I wait to see if my kid gets in, or what do I do if I don't have the COGAT score? You do have the Naglieri score to go back and look at from first grade. And so that one is also an IQ abilities test that, may or may not have been one of the identifiers. But I think if you're wondering about it, pieces that we often will say to parents is, does your kiddo um, do things that stand out? Do people note or remark about, things that they do? Are they independently motivated to engage in learning outside of school? Um, I my own kiddo, it's some of the stuff I put in her packet, I'm sure she didn't love when I applied for her, but like tonight, she was like, "Oh, we were talking about this game Mancala and I want to play it." And she went and got an egg carton and cut it apart and made a Mancala game at home. Like that would be a great example of something that she did. She went to figure out a way to build it. She tried a couple different ways until she figured out a way to build that game so that we could play it, because she wanted to teach me how to play. It could be that your kid is doing creating comics at home, or writing a book, or is doing things outside of school, is kind of engaging in research. We'll often have kids who are asking family members to do more challenging math work at home and things like that. um, One of the things that does happen sometimes is that we'll get to the table and we'll be looking at all of the work samples, and we'll realize that the work samples that we have as a school really showcase, in our opinion, your kiddo better. And so Mr. Gray will reach out and say, "Hey, we really feel like we have this pretty great work sample. How do and we get your input on that." Because ultimately our job at the school level for the full-time packets is to make them look at the best that they can, because that decision isn't made. It's made by people who don't know your kid. And that's where I always say, we have some families who they just submit the referral, but they don't do that optional parent input form, or they don't put a lot of detail. And what I would encourage you is that those things paint the picture of who your kiddo is as a learner. And so those really interesting examples are what help your kid potentially stand out. So I would encourage you to do all of that. And you're really, having to base it. We haven't had the COGAT scores come back before the packets have been due in like 10 years. So you're not going to have that score. You really have to base it kind of on your gut and what you're seeing. Is your kid being really successful in the classroom, as the teacher will give you indicators like they're asking for extra work or I'm having to challenge them in this way. Those would be some signs that, you really should be looking at that packet process. So we're happy to answer any other questions. I got a lot in the chat and I got a lot of direct messages, but we're happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Great questions, by the way.
There were a lot there. I got a lot more direct messages too than normal. The other part that's unique for Wakefield Forest is, again, our numbers, since they have switched their process, our numbers have been a little lower in that first year going into third grade. And so in order to keep our classes balanced, I look at as Mr. Gray said, I'm a huge data nerd. And we use our data to determine kiddos who weren't identified but were really strong students. And those students get the opportunity to be in the class. It's a year-to-year process for that. And, we encourage those families to put in an application if they feel like their kiddo this is the right fit for them and the academic rigor that they require to be successful. And so those numbers kind of shift over time as kids become eligible year to year. We do have kids who pop in fourth grade, who pop in fifth grade, who even pop in sixth grade for those opportunities. At Canterbury Woods, which is our local is our
Okay.
site center. All of the kids in the class would already be identified as a level 4 student. But what I would tell you is, by the data alone, the teachers, it's really sometimes hard for them to tell, which kiddo is a level 3 or which kiddo is a level 4. And I often, I know Miss Bunch will always come and ask me, she's like, I just want to make sure because I need to know this for like advanced math or something. But otherwise, really, the kids that we look at that are in that class are, really strong academic students. Um, so we're happy to answer questions. Again, Mr. Gray is your point of contact for this process. And certainly you can reach out to me if you have any additional questions or concerns. And we appreciate you, being here tonight. And we hope you have a good evening. If there are no questions, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.